No cute stinger, no funny opening today, because you wouldn't see that at a funeral, would you? No, you wouldn't. Today, sadly, it's time to give a eulogy to two really cool things that are adjacent to gaming. I think if you took 100 regular viewers of this program together, put them in a room, well, not forcibly, of course, give them some pizza and soda, but anyhow, and you ask them, please raise your hand if you have a passing or real interest in either of Pokemon, or for that matter, trading cards that come in packs, or poker. Almost everyone in the room would probably raise their hand, and so that's why I'm making this video. See, unfortunately, they can't all be exciting, fun, cool stories with a positive spin. Sadly, sometimes we must learn that it's time to mourn and grieve. And we gather here today to mourn the passing of two things that I know I've enjoyed at different points in my life. One I kind of still do from time to time, and that's, of course, Pokemon and poker. Let's start with Pokemon, because I'm sure you're all probably aghast and jaws dropped to the floor wondering, well, what the heck happened to Pokemon? Was there a bus accident, a plane crash? Sadly, something a little bit worse. That's right, human greed has finally consumed and caught up with our beloved little animal friends. I'm not talking about that Pal World game making things that look too much like them. I'm talking about just raw human bad personness. Anyhow, why is Pokemon deceased? Well, it's come to fore. You may have already seen some stories on YouTube or perhaps in the media about the latest trend that's just perhaps been around for a while underground, but has now become mainstream and getting worse by the day. That's right, technology ultimately is the tool used to take the fun out of Pokemon, and for that matter, any kind of trading card collectible where you open a pack of something hoping to get the most desirable or most expensive or most sought after card in that set. It turns out that the advances, the never-ending relentless march forward of CT scan technology, and then CAT scan. Think of that as something 100, 200 times more powerful than your standard X-ray that you might get at the dentist for that sore tooth. Well, it turns out this technology is not just for finding out what about our insides has gone astray. You can actually use it to scan up, say, a pack of Pokemon cards. Also maybe a box of Pokemon card packs, and I believe in some cases even an entire case of boxes of packs of Pokemon cards for the purposes of figuring out what cards are in all the packs, even though they're still sealed. Why does this mean the death of Pokemon? Well, to be clear, I'll just give you the fine print. Doesn't necessarily mean that Pokemon itself is completely dead, but a big part of Pokemon, and again, for that matter, any kind of collectible or sports trading cards, the fun and the excitement is not just to identify a card you really want. I mean, sure, you could go on eBay or Craigslist or a convention and just directly buy the card, but as with most collectibles, the fun of getting these things is finding them in the wild. And with trading cards, the idea there is buying a pack of them and hoping that you go through and find the thing that you want. Well, sadly, unless you have a direct connection to the factory, and I presume that most of us here don't have that kind of proverbial juice, you have to assume that there's a significant chance today, and that chance will only get stronger with each passing day, that that pack or box of case of cards you've chosen to purchase has already been virtually cherry-picked and analyzed by someone with this scanning technology. And the conclusion is probably already made that the most desirable cards don't in fact exist, or exist in a lower number than is average, and therefore whatever you paid was probably too much. And that's where it comes in. It's all about dollars and cents, kids. If it turns out that every sealed pack of cards that you purchase from a third party is almost guaranteed to be, well, proverbially worthless, or certainly not containing the exciting, super desirable cards, those, of course, kept by the person who scanned them, and presumably that pack was opened, and then those cards sold at full price. The old saying applies, and again, I'm going to tie it into poker here. If you're sitting at a poker table You don't know who the sucker at the table is. Sadly, that means it's you. And that's an interesting way to dovetail us into our second half memorial service here for things from our youth, or for that matter, things that we're still interested in. And that's poker. Poker. Yep. It's a game. It's been around, not unlike Pokemon, in the mainstream for about 20 years. Roughly the same amount of time has passed since poker became red hot as was when Chris Moneymaker, back in the early aughts, really brought poker from the underground card rooms and the smoky bars to the mainstream eye when he, just a normal guy, an everyday 9 to 5 ham and egger, and I don't think he'd take offense to that. He'd embrace that characterization. Won the main event of the World Series of Poker, the most prestigious and well-regarded poker tournament in the world, and in theory still remains so today, although I'm not sure how much longer, but we'll get to that in a minute. Poker's always been a game, of course, where there have been ne'er-do-well characters, things that it's been associated with the risk of not getting a fair game, a fair deal, if you will. But it's always also been a game where if you're savvy and you know what's going around you, you can kind of root out whether you've got that proverbial fair, honest deal or not. Well, sadly, we've come to a place in the world where that's not necessarily possible to determine anymore. Now, there's two ways to play poker these days. You can play it online, or you can play it live in person in a brick-and-mortar facility. It's always been the case, for the last few years at least, that I've played online poker less and less, realizing that the relentless march of technology has outpaced the ability of online poker providers to provide you with a fair game, i.e., the ways of colluding with one another in online poker have gotten more and more dubious. The potential for people being able to see your cards through hacking of machines and all sorts of shenanigans have just continued to happen. And of course, people have used what we call solvers, which are giant, supercomputer powered analytics tools that let you look at a real-time game and analyze millions, if not billions of situations, giving you an edge in your decision making that a mere human being will not have through the power of their own recall. But you say, okay, there's still the brick and mortar real life poker. And that's always been a place where you can get a much fairer game on the whole. Yes, of course, people sitting around the poker table could be colluding and putting signs to each other. They could be marking the cards with their fingernails, so on and so forth. But in all honesty, if you've been playing for a while, it's a lot easier to spot such real-life shenanigans than it is their online counterparts. And for many folks, especially older folks like me, it almost felt like that real-world poker was the last place you could really, truly feel you got a fair shake. You'd certainly like to think that if you were going to go to the World Series of Poker in Las Vegas each year, that of all the fair places to play poker, that would be probably the fairest, with all the different, the governing body of the World Series of Poker lingering in all places, tournaments with exhaustive sets of rules and regulations. You'd certainly like to think that if you played the main event of the World Series of Poker, you'd have an incredible amount of, governance and fair play. You'd like to think that if you actually made the final table of the World Series of Poker, boy, you'd have a really fair environment. All the lights and cameras of the world were watching to make sure everything went good. You'd like to think that if you got all the way down through 10,000 entrants in the main event of the World Series of Poker, that you'd have the fairest game possible, notwithstanding whether your skill level or your luck at that point in time was going to carry you over the finish line. You'd at least have a fair shot. Well, sadly, after the events of the latest World Series of Poker main event that happened just a few weeks ago, I'd call that into question as well. You see, it turns out that one of the two competitors of the remaining two in this prestigious tournament was actually relying on help and guidance from his friends on the rail, who had an open laptop and were clearly analyzing what was going on with the hands being played, and then information and guidance being relayed to that player during breaks in the action. That's beyond unfair to the other person playing the game, who really had to rely on their own one meat stick brain, thinking about powers of recall like, hey, I saw the guy fart when he got 2 pair a few hours ago. He might be bluffing. Something like that. Whereas this other opponent had the benefit of, again, the equivalent of a supercomputer crunching the numbers and figuring out what the optimal play was at all times. Now, not necessarily providing real-time guidance, but when you've got an idea of how a player's tendencies are working and getting information every few minutes or so, well, again, that's an overwhelming advantage, completely unfair. So if we're at a point now where I can't really trust online poker and I can't trust brick and mortar poker, what's the point in playing? It just becomes merely a place where any money I invest is presumably going to be lost, and it's strictly a form of entertainment. But if I want entertainment, I'll go to my local cinema and I'll watch the latest Henry Potter movie, or the Wizards and the Wands, or whatever, the newest, the newest Star Wars Trek thing, or I don't watch a lot of movies, folks, but you know what? I don't want my entertainment to cheat me. Spend my entertainment dollar on something that's not clearly openly hostile to me. That's the way I look at it. So sadly, we sit here and we come back around and realize again, 2 formerly really cool pastimes are no longer fun because of human greed, the unrelenting advancement of technology, and the inability, and for that matter, the inability of governing bodies to do anything about it. I mean, granted, at the end of the day, I'll concede, you can't, for example, bring that newly purchased box of Pokemon cards down to the urgent care clinic and tell them that you think it's got a spleen problem and if you could please do a CT scan. Oh, and by the way, we believe the condition that box has is something called Bulbasaur. I think the best way to conclude is to say, I'm hoping that we can find new hobbies, or at least hold on to hobbies that still haven't been completely compromised, enjoy them while they last, and focus on the good things in life. We'll miss you, Pokemon. We'll miss you, poker. But let's look for things that haven't yet, again, been completely taken from us by greed and malice. Enjoy them. Hug them. Give them a squeeze. Tell them how much you love them. Never forget them. And remember, anything could be gone at the blink of an eye. So enjoy what you love. To complete this poignant memorial, it turns out that Amazing Grace is public domain. So let's fade out with a touching musical interlude.